Did you get that table, Laplace transforms? Okay. Could you solve that ordinary differential equation? Ordinary differential equation could not solve. One in CA bar, Laplace transforms of CA. I am talking about the penetration theory with first order chemical reaction. The other one, which is the combination of film and surface renal model by Dobbins, that I expect you will get stuck. Okay. But penetration theory, where the element is infinite, there the Laplace transform inversion should be easy. I don't expect much problem. One of the entries, suitable entries should be picked up. But before that, you have to solve that ordinary differential equation in CA bar, the Laplace transform of CA. My question was, could you solve that ordinary differential equation in CA bar or not? You get CA bar as a function of z, because time is integrated out, and because the second order ordinary differential equation, there will be two constants of integration. Those you have to evaluate from the transform boundary conditions. We had written that also. The transform boundary conditions will be at the interface, the concentration is CAI. At the interface, the concentration is CAI, and that means in the Laplace domain, CA bar they will be equal to the interface concentration is constant CAI divided by P. Laplace of a constant is constant by P, isn't it? The other boundary condition was at z tends to infinity, as at z tending to infinity, the concentration was dropping because of reaction. It was Ca equal to Ca0 e power minus k1 triple prime t. You get that? When you transform that, Laplace of Ca at z tending to infinity will be Ca bar equal to Ca0 by P plus k1 triple prime, right? So, those are two conditions, you use those and get the constants. They will be in terms of P. Once you have this Ca bar, then you can try inverting using the entries which I gave you. But I guess you have had too little time. I don't expect you will be able to submit it now. So, combine it together. This definitely should be submitted next Friday. If possible, the Dobbins theory, which I can give you some clues about, some guidance, that could be also included in that assignment. So, I will leave it to you, because in any case we are going to grade your individual problems. Okay. So, either combine the two problems and submit next Friday, or at least this should be submitted. In case Dobbins combination of film and surface renal model you are still not able to manage, we will give you extra time. Okay. Which means you will take the default option, you will submit this, and the film surface renal combination will come later, but I do not want to delay that work anyway. So, perhaps during the Tuesday lecture, that is next when we meet, I will explain how to go for inversion of Laplace transform in a finite domain problem. Okay. Until then, you have more time to revise your Laplace transform. Okay. All the properties, basic theorems you should be well versed with. This is the opportunity. All right. That you already know, right? So, there is no point in repeating what you already know. Learn something new. I know that, but this will be new experience to you using Laplace transform inversion for finite domain problems. We are at it, so it should not be difficult. All right, talking about the boundary layer approach to the transport phenomena problems and the genesis of analogies between momentum, heat and mass transfer, it boiled down to identification of the form of the governing equation in terms of a generic dependent variable psi, which could be replaced by the velocity, concentration or temperature, correspondingly replacing chi by momentum diffusivity, mass diffusivity, or thermal diffusivity. And we had chosen this particular way of non-dimensionalization, which could be thought of as ratios of deviations. You have yet not done process control, I suppose, or you have had a course on process, you are having now. Okay. So, in process control you will often be introduced with this concept of deviation. You think of a deviation from a set point and so on. The concept of deviation is useful in other areas also. In a sense, these are deviation variables. They are deviations from the value at the interface. Velocity at interface is 0, concentration is Ci, temperature is Ti. So, the numerators are the deviations of velocity, concentration and temperature from the interface values. Okay. Once you take note of this fact that these are deviations, then next question is where do the deviations become maximum? Between the free stream and the interface. So, it will be U0 minus 0, Ca0 minus Cai and T0 minus Ti, those are the maximum values. So, individual local deviations you divide by the maximum possible. So, we know now we have these taking up the boundary conditions of 0 and 1. Okay. I mentioned yesterday that we take recourse to non-dimensionalization not only to represent diverse external data in a compact fashion, but also to facilitate computations. And I gave an example of your equations possibly being stiff, not amenable to normal algorithms, and therefore you require something like Geer's algorithm to solve that problem. But there is a small chance that if the problem is not exactly a stiff system of differential equations, yet it is going to be hard for computer to handle the numbers which are very, very different. The non-dimensionalization renders the problems in terms of numbers which are described as human sized numbers. We are not talking of very different quantities. Numbers, you are not talking of, let us say, in the same breath as a magnitude of the order of 10 raised to 30 as against to a magnitude of 10 raised to minus 25. If you have to deal with those numbers, given the finite number of decimals that our computational systems deal with, generally maximum of 64 decimals, it would become very difficult to solve the dimensional problem. Whereas you render it non-dimensional and then everything goes between 0 and 1. Okay. So, that's the advantage. The computer can handle those different numbers with similar precision in the dimensionless space. Experimentally, it reduces the number of independent variables and parameters. You have a reduction in the number of different parameters that you have to otherwise deal with. By combination into dimensionless groups, these reduce the problem both in terms of handling as well as grasping to a lesser number of dimensionless groups. That is what Buckingham Pi theorem drives you at. Okay. So, this is the way we go. We then realize that it is possible to solve these profiles and finally represent the fluxes for mass, heat in terms of these gradients evaluated and the definition of the transfer coefficients. For mass transfer coefficient, it will be say KL delta Ca. For heat transfer, it is H delta T, and for momentum transfer, it will be this F by 2 U0 delta rho U, which is rho U0 minus 0. When you work through this, you would come across the result which is shown in this slide. For heat transfer, we have a combination of these basic dimensionless groups, Nusselt, Reynolds and Prandtl, in that form, Nusselt divided by Reynolds Prandtl to the power 1 by 3, and it happens to be identical as Sherwood by Reynolds Schmidt to the power 1 by 3. Prandtl is to Schmidt in heat transfer in terms of properties, and these come out to be equal to f by 2, and all these are equal to 0.332 Reynolds to the power minus half. Okay. This is if the analogies were to hold good generally, which means we are talking of momentum transfer, heat transfer and mass transfer all translating seamlessly. If this were true, the widest body of data which is here could be made use of in mass transfer and heat transfer without having to do experiments. It turns out that this is ruled out by experiments mostly, by and large, except for the cases, limited number of cases dealing with near atmospheric pressure gaseous systems, we don't have this general equality. But the salvage part of analogy is that this works out pretty good. Okay. This is expected for Prandtl greater than 0.6 and for constant interface temperature and concentration T0 and CH0. Reynolds number could be up to 80,000. We could have written the average Nusselt-Sherwood by averaging over a given distance from the leading edge. You could integrate this out over 0 to x and divide by x. That will mean that this would give you a factor 2 on top, because Reynolds has x, so it is x to the power minus half. When you integrate, it becomes x to the power half. We divide by x, so that brings back x to the power minus half, but we also have to divide by half, which means this becomes double. So the average values could be written as Nusselt average by Reynolds Prandtl to the power 1 by 3, Sherwood divided by Reynolds Schmidt to the power 1 by 3, F average by 2, and becomes 0.664 Reynolds to the power minus half. You could now look at how the mass transfer coefficient would vary with the diffusivity. Sherwood number is the mass transfer coefficient times the length scale divided by diffusivity. Schmidt is mu by rho dAB. So we will have dAB to the power 1 by 3 in the numerator. This has dAB in denominator. So that will mean that KL average will go as dAB to the power 2 by 3. Clear? At a fixed Reynolds number, this is a constant. This is KL L by dAB, and this is mu by rho dAB. Forget about everything else except dAB to the power 1 by 3 in denominator. That will go to the top, will become dAB to the power 1 by 3. Sherwood has dAB in the denominator. So you will be left with dAB to the power 2 by 3. Take it on the other side. So the average mass transfer coefficient is constant times dAB to the power 2 by 3, which means the mass transfer coefficient is now coming out to be proportional to dAB to the power 2 by 3, similar to what you had found in the Graetz-Nusselt theory. So that was the connection. There was one more incentive in introducing Graetz-Nusselt theory at that position, because then mathematically you have a seamless transition from the models of mass transfer on one hand and the boundary layer analysis on the other. Okay. It also gave me an opportunity to tell you that seemingly more rigorous model or even better sounding assumptions in the model don't necessarily take you to a better description of reality. Sometimes in my experience with mathematical modeling, I found that the reverse happens. You think that logically you have a better model, but reality portrays something different. That is where I believe that all knowledge will begin with experiments and end with experiments. No theory, no model can exist in isolation unless validated by experiments. It's hard to do both. experiments are hard enough. Development of theories possibly equally hard. Good researchers will be able to be good at both experiments as well as theory. And there are relatively very few people in the world who do both. But that's where I think you should target if you want to distinguish yourself. Where a turbulent boundary layer exists, I mentioned we would have a viscous sublayer. And in the viscous sublayer, the model chosen for representing eddy diffusivities will come into picture. I have already emphasized the role of experimental measurements. I have already actually preempted analogies, so I am going to gloss over most of it. I told you that because of the ease of measurements, the data on pressure drop or friction are most abundant. It would have been desirable to make use of that body of experimental measurements for direct utilization in heat transfer and mass transfer. But unfortunately, the analogies don't hold good equally all throughout. It's here that I have to bring your attention to a little more detail. When you think of friction, you can have the friction factor which takes into account the skin friction drag. But where I mentioned the separation of boundary layer or formation of vortices or eddies, we are talking of now friction of even greater magnitude, and that we call form friction. If the analogies have to hold good, then generally we expect if the frictional contribution comes from the skin friction, there is a chance we may have an analogy between momentum transfer and heat and mass transfer on the other hand. If form friction is there, the chances are lesser. I will leave this for you to read. Generally speaking, then, we might summarize our results as this combination Sherwood by Reynolds Schmidt or Nusselt by Reynolds Prandtl as functions of F by 2 Schmidt and the ratio of the eddy momentum diffusivity to mass or heat diffusivities. Or you could write another function psi 2 of F by 2 Schmidt, Ed to nu and Es to nu apart from Prandtl. And the successful completion of these analogies depends on our knowledge of how Ed to Ev, Ev to nu and Es to nu vary with distance from the interface. If Ed to Ev and Es to Ev is equal to 1, we should be able to use the information in heat transfer directly in mass transfer. We could summarize what we have been discussing, that for analogous circumstances, we could simply replace the analogous groups, and then we will be able to obtain the transfer coefficients in dimensionless form by the same functions. The limitations are the following. First, the flow conditions and geometry must be same. Let's explain this a bit. If the heat transfer data have been obtained purely for heat transfer, no mass transfer accompanies, then we will be able to obtain from the analogy mass transfer coefficients corresponding to no net mass transfer. I think this is obvious. Broadly, heat transfer problem has no accompanying mass transfer. Okay. If we use analogies and try to invoke these data from heat transfer for inferring mass transfer, we will be able to cover only these transfer coefficients. Remember, the primes were for equimolar counter diffusion. You could estimate mass transfer coefficients, but they will be corresponding to no net mass transfer. There is a counterbalancing. And when we want to make use of these kind of correlations or relations, we will have to take Sherwood number based on Drew's generalized mass transfer coefficient F. which means basically if you have information on transfer coefficients at one level of driving force, you have to convert it into F and then use it at another level of mass transfer driving force. So, the take home point is Sherwood number must be this FL by C dAB. You already have done that assignment in which F was related to the whole range of transfer coefficients, both in case of equimolar counter diffusion and for diffusion of A through stagnant B. So, if you have accidental information on any of those transfer coefficients, first you will have to use those correlations to get F, use Sherwood number, this definition, and then use the analogy for inferring information on say heat transfer or other way around. There is one problem in treble I would advise you to go through carefully, which will explain this point. It is a solved problem. Also, this analogy will hold only if there is no chemical reaction accompanied. It is important that the boundary conditions are also analogous. So, here we could imagine the falling film problem. The heat transfer case would require that the heat be transferred from gas to liquid. That is how mass is being transferred from gas to liquid. Then the heat transfer must begin at the same y as the mass transfer, which means y equal to 0, that is the beginning of the test section. Then we had in mass transfer the interface concentration fixed. In the heat transfer problem, you would require the interface temperature to be constant. So, heat must be transferred from gas to liquid, the liquid surface temperature must be constant, test section must be same for both mass transfer and heat transfer, and then we had presumed constant properties. So, the same thing should be true in heat transfer problem also. This will ensure that from the perspective of boundary conditions also, the two situations of heat and mass transfer are analogous. In case of turbulent flow, this is a relatively safe result. EH is approximately equal to ED. AD thermal diffusivity, AD mass diffusivity are approximately same. Then friction factors and velocity profiles could be expected to correlate with the heat and mass transfer quantities only when these three AD diffusivities are equal, but that would be possible in the turbulent flow and in extension to viscous sublayer only when we have the AD to molecular transport coefficients ratios to be constant. EV to nu, EH to alpha, AD to DAB if they are same. Then the friction factor must only depend on the skin friction, not the form drag up. As I said, it is safest to avoid the analogy of the momentum transfer with heat and mass transfer. Safest to rely on analogy between heat and mass transfer. This point I had already explained. Determination of heat transfer coefficient from the tip of a needle would be very difficult, but corresponding mass transfer coefficients could be measured easily, and then you could use analogies to infer the heat transfer coefficient. So, it is both ways. Information which is easily obtained for mass transfer may become the source for inferring information on heat transfer. I wanted to show you lots of pictures, but I got only a few today. But let us have a look at this. Have you seen anything like this? Does this remind you of anything you have seen? Okay, the outer cover, the peel, closer to reality. What else? An example from other than plants, specifically insect world. You have eye for a detail. Have you seen honey? I will come to honey a little later, but hive of honeybees, ever seen honeybee hive? It is interesting in nature, there is so much symmetry, one wonders why. Okay. So, you do not seem to be so close to nature, I have to drive you, but I am certain you have consumed honey sometime or other. You must have played with honey also. There is a very interesting observation Maybe some of you might want to try out next time you come across honey. I have never seen this reported anywhere as my own observation. But if you take a cup, a metal cup, and put a few drops of honey in it and then pour some water, a layer of water, and you rotate it slowly. Honey is very viscous, but it's mostly natural sugars, so those would also dissolve. So it's a combined problem of momentum transfer and mass transfer. Eventually, of course, all honey would get dissolved in water if you keep swirling, but just observe what you see. Something very interesting happens. The honey spreads a bit while dissolving and it forms polyhedral cells. Not very different from this, maybe not this regular, but because your shaking, I guess, is not exactly symmetrical or uniform. Okay, let me ask another question. Now, these things are all related. Now, I am taking you to the laboratory. Once again, a thought experiment. Visualize. Imagine I have given you two glass plates, glass slabs. Okay, you could keep them parallel to each other, close to each other, leaving a very little gap. So you have the facility to bring these glass slabs close to each other at a uniform distance. You are given in addition a heater which you can use to heat one of the glass plates. You need one more thing. You need a viscous liquid, say oil. Now think of this. If I have this oil sandwiched between the glass plates and this layer is of uniform thickness, and in one case I do this experiment, I heat up the top plate to a fixed temperature. Suppose room temperature is 37 degrees, I could keep the top plate at 47, 57, 67, whatever I choose, constant temperature. What do you expect to see? And you are looking from top. The heater can allow you the maintenance of top plate temperature at a higher temperature, but it also allows you to see what's happening. You need something more. Maybe finely ground aluminum powder mixed in a small weight percentage in oil, almost neutrally buoyant. So the particles will stay wherever they are in the layer to begin with. So if you start with both plates at the same temperature, then raise the upper plate temperature, say through these units of 10 degrees or whatever, what do you expect you will be able to see? Appearance of aluminum dust dispersed in oil will be, let's say, grayish kind of slurry. The oil layer has aluminum dust suspended and you are looking from top. The role of aluminum is as a visualization aid. Oil is transparent, so if oil starts moving, we won't be able to see it. But if the aluminum particles are there, or you could use finely ground fish fins. Fish scale, dried and powdered, will give you shiny particles. They can serve similar role as aluminum dust to visualize how the liquid is moving. If you now look at this top plate maintained at higher and higher temperature, will you expect to see anything or the same grayish mixture no matter what the upper temperature is? We won't expect much. So why would we not expect anything here? Okay, whatever your reason, keep it at the back of your mind. Okay. Move to the second part of thought experiment. What you do is now keep the upper plate at room temperature and start maintaining the lower plate at constant higher temperatures. Say 37 above, 47, 57, etc. in a series of increments. You are observing again from top. What would you expect to see? There will be motion. Okay, now come to the reasonings. Why was it thought that the oil won't move when the upper surface is maintained at higher temperature. So, warmer oil will have lesser density. So, we have higher density at the bottom, lower density at top. So, these layers will be stable. Okay. In the other case, what you are doing is you have the upper layer heavier, lower layer becoming lighter. The detail is as follows. Up to certain critical difference in temperature, in the lower plate being at higher temperature, also you would not observe any motion. Okay. However, at a certain critical dimensionless number corresponding to inclusion of this density difference on account of temperature difference, there will be a state of instability setting in, and it happens as a threshold. Until certain increase in temperature, nothing, no motion. Beyond that temperature, you see the whole thing suddenly splits into this pattern of hexagonal cells. This is actually a picture from a similar situation. The next picture will give you a blown up magnified view. It is here through the center that the fluid is rising. It is through the sides it is sinking. So, you have these convection rules, Rayleigh-Benard convection rules setting in as a critical phenomenon. This is an example of a critical phenomenon where you do not see any change up to a point, and then suddenly there is a huge change happen. That is what I said. You have to have this instability setting in. It happens at a certain magnitude, critical magnitude of a Rayleigh number. Density difference is there, but that is not able to overcome the other part, the viscosity. Okay. So, these lighter layers are stuck below heavier layers, and the viscosity plays a part. It does not allow these layers to come, but at certain point that balance gets shifted, then you have this. Okay. I'll mention one practical example. It is contextually of interest. You know, we could trap solar energy, convert it into electricity, but sometimes you want to trap the solar energy in the form of heat also. So, what could be done is that you could have a large tank built which is open, and it is filled up with layers of salt solution at different concentration. Heaviest layer at the bottom, then next lower density, low concentration one, next one, and so on. Finally, you have the ordinary water at the top. If you had these stratified layers of brine at different concentrations, different densities, they would remain stable. Now, if the sun shines, the heat is trapped, and heat is trapped in these different layers. So, this is the concept of solar pond, where the stability is assured, and then this heat is trapped, and then you can utilize later. Okay. The other way around it won't be possible. So, this is one where the heat could be a potential source of instability, but these kind of Rayleigh-Benard convection rules can also be triggered on account of density differences created because of mass transfer. If you have a solute of a higher density dissolving in the top layer of liquid, you could obtain convection rules like this. And sometimes people have studied this also. A reaction may introduce a compositional difference and a density difference leading to convection rules, and there have been quite a few studies in 80s about the instabilities introduced or induced because of mass transfer. Maybe we can stop here.